I'm thinking a lot of people are not familiar with religions.
Okay.
Like the way that they are run, the way that they have regional conference centers, a treasurer, a secretary, and all the trappings that you get in any sort of political system. You got people in charge of different services. You got people in charge of like helping the needy. You got people in charge of all sorts of things. They take their payment the same way as a proportion of your income.
Yes.
And it's not like you start to see, once you know from the inside out how a religion works, you look around and instead of imagining there's two types of organizations that work that way, turns out there might only be one.
Yes.
Like you've got companies, you've got restaurants, you've got all sorts of like taxi services and domestic servants and all sorts of services and products that are sold, and they're just making an offer, and like that's well understood. Even a charity can just like present you the opportunity to give you their money or whatever. But like the religions of old would use a threat, obviously, of God's disapproval, if not hell.
Or excommunication.
Or excommunication, and the state does the same. But not only that, any service or good that you buy has a price, and that price is the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Whereas the state and the church, they proportion their pricing according to your income.
Yeah.
And this goes all the way back to like the Hebrews, where you'd bring a portion of your yields, like if you had pressed a lot of oil, you'd bring some of the oil, or if you'd had a prize flock, you'd bring some of the flock as your payment to the temple. So that whole like pricing structure as well is the same. And as soon as a religion doesn't have a state ordering it not to enforce its own code, its own laws, if you have a religion that is equal to or superior to the state, they will enforce their tithing. And they'll associate pains with not paying it. So that's just as compulsory as taxation in that case. It's the same. It's like if you kind of like the position that what we think of as religions find themselves in today, the ecclesiastical religions, let's say, the Catholic Church, the Baptist, the Methodist, so on. They find themselves in the same sort of situation that like a charity or a wannabe state would find itself in if it doesn't have a monopoly on law, because they wouldn't be able to force people to comply with their code. They wouldn't be able to force people to fund them. But like the main difference that we see now between religion and state, the main differences are on account of the state not being in a position to enforce their code or their funding and so forth. More of there actually being a material difference in how they operate.
Right. So when it comes to, say, separation of church and state, that was kind of like a split between two factions or something, or it's like a power grab from this state religion from the church. That
is kind of how I see it. So this went down at the Council of Westphalia in the 1650s, and a lot of people, myself included, didn't realize or don't realize how new the concept of a nation state really is.
Yes.
Even like it's in its infancy. So basically the 1650s, when the papal states were kind of standing down, and they had what was called the Peace of Westphalia, this get together of the leaders of Europe. And basically, like, in my view, the priestly robes that were left like lying limp on the floor at that meeting, where they basically got together and said, right, no more ecclesiastical religions can enforce themselves on people, only civil religions can. The priestly robes that were left lying on the floor at the Peace of Westphalia are what we know of as religion today. The Catholic Church, the Protestants that came out of that, and so on. They don't have the force of law behind them. They don't have compulsion behind them anymore. Not because it went away. Like compulsion is the heart of the beast. The compulsion is what made Catholicism as a compulsory religion bad. Okay, compelling people to pay their tithes, compelling people to recant, compelling people to at least keep up appearances of being Catholic. That is the heart of the beast. The heart of the beast is binding people to compulsory law, and it just changed its garb. You know, it took off its priestly robes and wrapped itself in a flag and carried on its merry way. You know, so I don't see the separation of church and state that happened at the Peace of Westphalia as much more than a linguistics game. If you want to Google this model, what you'll be looking for is civil religion. There's especially one sociologist, Robert Bulah, Beulah, I believe, and he's written like an essay called "The American Civil Religion." There's one video on YouTube based on his model, and that's pretty much the most thorough, clear-headed interpretation of this model that I've seen. And basically, the idea is that is there a civil religion that's operating alongside and above what we think of as religions?